Om. 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 Sahana bhavatu, sahano bhunaktu, saviryam karavavahe, tejasvinavaditamastu, ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Gurum Paramparam. Om Yogena Chetasya Padena Vacham Malam Sharirasya Javekagena Yopakarotam Pravaram Muninam Patanjalim Pran Jalilanatosmi Patanjalim Pranjaliranatosmi. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Okay, so welcome everyone to today's talk. So we're going to be talking today about the yamas and the niyamas. So in some ways the yamas are the don'ts, and the niyamas are the observances. And also to be able to understand that, we have to revisit the aims of life. We have to understand the context of the yamas and the niyamas, and then we're going to go into the detail of them. So the idea is, I could talk about each one of them for ages, but today the point is just to give a little bit of an overview, and then as we go on, we will build on these contexts. Okay, so to go back, about the aim of life, you can call it freedom, you can call it happiness, you can call it moksha, you can call it liberation, whatever you like. But I'm just going to stick with the words freedom and happiness, just because there is less confusion about these two, probably. So there is happiness that we can get in our everyday life. So to freedom from everyday suffering. And then there is also the freedom from rebirth. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the freedom from suffering in our everyday life. So it is this understanding that we are this, our true nature is happiness. And that is why we kind of try and avoid anything that is sad or not. So we always go back to our source, which is happiness, and everything that we think make us happy is something that we chase, right? So sometimes we might be right about the thing that makes us happy, but sometimes we might be wrong about that thing, what it is that makes us happy. So so here there's the example of a sugar crystal, and saying, the sugar crystal saying, well, when will I become sweet? But the point is, the sugar crystal is already sweet. It's just that it doesn't know it. Okay, so it's the same for us. Our nature is happiness, but we just don't know it. That's all there is to it. And all these practices that we do, all these self-knowledge is around getting us to discover that, or to just discover what is already there, or to appreciate what is already there. And also, reducing freedom from suffering in everyday life is also accompanied by reducing dependence on external happenings. Okay, so this is a perfect example of lockdowns, what we're going through is, I mean, if we were our happiness were dependent on the things that we used to do only, then we would be very miserable now. And also to reduce our dependence, the happiness dependence on objects and also other people. It's not saying that we don't need them or we don't want them, but it's just saying that they are here, they're part of our lives, but our happiness is our mission. So this is something very personal, so something to do with us and about us. And also, how do we know that we gain freedom from suffering every day? So we feel a real strength, and the feelings of helplessness might not be there anymore, or at least reduce. And this is really what we aim to achieve. And of course, there is freedom that we might want to achieve, which is freedom from rebirth. So we've gone through the cycle, and that is something else. So when does that happen? So freedom from rebirth happens when there is no more karma to be fructified. So when we've exhausted all our accumulated karmas over lifetimes and lifetime, and there is no more desire that's left for us, and there's hence no reason to be born again, nothing to be fructified. So here you will see that there is this emphasis on having less and less desires, and that's the way to getting that longer term freedom, if you like. And everything that we do to alleviate freedom on an everyday basis will lead us to that freedom as well. And so it's not something that necessarily, some of us are sort of think of it as an aim and some of us don't, and that's okay, that's absolutely fine. But eventually that's where we're all heading. That's eventually the aim, whether we are aware of it or not, whether we accept it or not. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the 8 limbs of yoga. So the Ashtanga yoga, which is how this is described in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So Patanjali wrote the Yoga Sutras, which is one of the authoritative texts. And at the beginning, I did an invocation to Patanjali. And we're going to talk more about some of these scriptures in later months, but for now, just accept it as one of these authoritative texts in yoga. Sometimes people call it Raja Yoga as well, but I don't think that's a very good term. And sometimes Raja Yoga only means meditation practices, but anyway, so that's just there in case you see the term. But I'm going to be using the definitions as per Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, which is Ashtanga Yoga. Asht means 8, Anga means limb, hence this word, 8 limbs of yoga. So what we really want to achieve, why we want to do this, is to get this discrimination, the power to discriminate what is real and what is not real, what is eternal, what is not eternal. So what is here to stay in the world, and what are things that's just going to pass after a while, and what is here to stay. And so the only thing that is eternal is the Atma, or consciousness, and everything else, including our beautiful bodies, are not eternal. So this is what we're trying to do. So we're trying to kind of get that knowledge. And also sometimes in the West, people kind of use these terms very loosely about the 8 limbs of yoga. But one thing to really understand, that when Patanjali wrote this, he is writing this with the aim of attaining liberation. So this is not about health. This is not about maintaining health. This is not about gaining fame or anything like that, but this is about attaining liberalization, self-realization. This is what this is about. And so we need to kind of understand that this is where we're coming from. And the point that we want to also emphasize is that we're here today trying to do things a little bit differently, because we want our lives to take a slightly different path, or to go in a certain way. So if we want change, then some things in our lives need to change. Otherwise, everything will carry on as per normal, as per usual. So if we want change, then we have to be ready to make these changes to our lives. And the more serious we become about happiness, or our ultimate aims, then the more our daily activities will have to change to be in line of these. And again, I've said that before, but this doesn't mean escaping to the Himalayas or anything like that. We can do it in our daily life, in whatever we do. And a lot of it is kind of a state of mind. It might sound a little bit scary. So, oh, this is, what does that make me? Does that make me different from others or whatever? But it actually is a very joyful experience, and there's nothing really scary about it. And there are loads of practices here, and we can choose those practices depending on our desires, depending on how intense that desire for freedom is. And the Sanskrit word for it is mumukshutva. So how much that desire is there, and also depending on our personalities and temperaments, and how much we've done in past lives. I mean, we've all done some practice in past lives. Otherwise, this would not interest us in any way whatsoever. We don't know about it. We don't know how, but we must have. There must have been something in our samskara, in our impressions, that kind of makes us attracted to these things. So through the practice of Ashtanga Yoga, what happens is that impurities are eliminated to prepare us for this knowledge about who we really are. And as you know, not all our friends are into this kind of knowledge, and that's fine. It doesn't mean that we're superior or anything like that. It just means we are at different stages of our journey, and that's absolutely fine. And we talked about these impurities in the very earlier lectures. We also use the word kleshas, or we call them as sufferings, afflictions, or whatever you call them. And they were things like fear of death, likes, dislikes, the fact that we don't know who we are, and then the fact that we identify with this body a lot. And so therefore, all these practices that we're going to be talking about within the 8 limbs of yoga, we're going to talk only about the first 2. The idea of these practices is to purify the mind, is to prepare us to finally get this knowledge. And when we practice the right things, how do we know we are doing the right things? Is we feel very strong now and for the future as well. And it gives us kind of joy in doing those practices. So if practices are not joyful, then there is something that's not right. I mean, it might be a little bit hard, but it should still be joyful. And also what happens is the more we repeat these practices, we are creating impressions for the future, which we will carry from one birth to another. So all the knowledge that we have from the material sciences, or other things about, we might be a great cook in this birth, and we're not going to carry this necessarily into the next birth. But then knowledge of the self is something that we do carry. And also, nowadays, when we talk about conduct, values, and all that, there is always this resistance towards rules, and one of the issues or one of the problems is that we want to be able to do every action that we do should have a long-term vision of what we're doing, and the impact needs to be understood fully. So I mean, I'll come back to this point later on, but in some ways, if we do something wrong and we might be found out by the court that, okay, we're not guilty or something, and that's fine, we carry on. But then really, when we are doing things that are right or wrong, we need to kind of take the long-term vision of it and its impact over several lifetimes. And so the 8 limbs of yoga, so I will go through all of these, and then today we will be concentrating only on the first 2. And so we will be talking about the yama. So everything in green, if you don't want to remember them, that's absolutely fine. It's just the Sanskrit names that I like to share, but then you just need to understand what it means. So the translation of yama is code of restraint, abstinence, self-regulation. And they are normally things that are connected to society, so they're not just about us. And then niyamas, on the other hand, are observances, practices, self-training, and that's personal to us, and that's connected to things that we have to do. And then the third limbs of yoga is asanas, so physical postures, which you all know about. So even the aim of the asanas is got nothing to do with health. That's not how it's presented in this scripture. But obviously you can have health benefit, but that's not why it came into how it's treated in this. And I think I've used this example before. It's kind of, the system of yoga is just so powerful. And it's almost saying that, if we just use the asanas in the system of yoga, it's like, great. It's almost like we are using a supercomputer, which is worth hundreds, thousands of pounds, which is really, really powerful. And all we do with it is play solitaire, right? So there is so much more that we could do with that computer, but we are not doing. There's nothing wrong with playing solitaire on a really expensive computer, but we're not fully utilizing the full power of that computer. And it's exactly the same here. Yoga is this rich system. If we want to focus on asanas only, then that's fine. But then there is so much more that we can use. And then there is breath and prana regulation. So I just want to say that pranayama is not just breath, but it is control of prana. So we have seen before that prana is more than just breath. It is the subtle energy, the movement of the subtle energy within the body. And then the fifth one is withdrawal of senses. So it's almost turning inwards. So we kind of shut down our senses, hearing, vision, etc. And then we go within. And sometimes in the yoga class, I would say, close your eyes and just focus on what you're doing. So this is a little bit glimpses of the practice that we kind of do to try and help us to go inwards a little bit, so that we're not stimulated by a beautiful sky or anything else. And then the next one is concentration, so dharana, and so focusing on one object for a little while. And then dhyana is focusing for a bit longer and with the same train of thoughts. And then the eighth point in the limb of yoga is meditation in a high state, or here the term that Patanjali uses is anga samadhi. So there are different types of samadhi, so we're not going to go into the details of it, but it's just saying that there are various types of samadhi within that text. So now moving on to the yamas. So there are 5 yamas and 5 niyamas. And I think some people say that in some texts there are more than that, but we're focusing only on 5 of them. And the most important one is number 1, and it is ahimsa, so that's the Sanskrit word, and the English translation for it is harmlessness. So sometimes people translate it as non-violence, but I think non-violence, as my teacher says, is a little bit restrictive. So it's a little bit broader than just non-violence, and we will talk about it in a bit more detail. And satya means truth, truthfulness, and honesty. And asteya, so steya means stealing. So with the a before, it means non-stealing or abstention from theft. Okay, so and the brahmacharya is also a term that is kind of not properly used sometimes, but it means practicing the presence of God, walking in the awareness of the highest reality, and it also means restraint of sexual desires, so controlling this urge of sexual desires, and we'll talk more about it. And aparigraha means non-possessiveness, and it means non-holding through the senses, non-greed, not taking anything extra from anyone or the nature than we actually need to survive. So not to kind of feed any desires to accumulate, but just for what we need. So we'll go into one by one what these means. And I think to all of us, these are not surprising things, and these kind of make perfect sense from a societal point of view. And okay, so we'll talk about ahimsa first. And harmlessness is being compassionate to all beings. I just wanted to mention this. So this is a practice that people practice to various extents. So I don't know if you know about Jainisms. So Jains, so people who practice it fully, ahimsa. So they don't even use light at night, because any insect might just coming into contact with the light. So the practice is taken to different degrees. And also, I think in India you would see that people walk with a little bit of a broom in front of them, clearing their path, so that by mistake they wouldn't kill any insects that they can't see by just walking. So so people, it's really the practice of being compassionate to other beings. And so, well, it starts maybe with just not harming beings, and then slowly with practice, the feeling of compassion arises. So compassion to all beings, whether they are friends or not. And I think we all understand the term non-violence in a physical way, but also to say that it could be with words as well, and that's a more subtle way of himsa, of being violent, by saying harsh words and things like that, which sometimes we miss when we're just talking about when we use the term violent or non-violent. And also we need to understand that sometimes this harmlessness can be intentional, and sometimes it can be unintentional. And obviously the consequences of both of them can be different. But then sometimes if it's unintentional, it could be that people have it so ingrained in them that they're not even aware of it. That doesn't make it all right. But that is possible too. And then there is, of course, intentional, where on purpose people say things or do things. And so one of the reasons that we want to practice non-harmlessness is that we have to understand that we're all this one consciousness. All beings are part of this one consciousness. And then by hurting them, it just boomerangs back to us. So just like a boomerang, it just comes back to us in this life, in future life. We might see it, we might not know why, but it does come back to us, and there is no escaping that. So there is always this price to pay for any inflicted harm to anything. And also to understand that it helps to purify our mind. So when there is violence in our life, it is a negative, it's a negative thing. And negativity is a hindrance to us. It kind of diverts our energy into this thing that we don't want to be spending our time with this. And it kind of changes a lot in the person who we are. And also, more worryingly, is that they're also these things as the recipient or even as the recipient or as the person who's doing this, then they cause impressions, and that can go deep within our subconscious, deep within who we are, and that gets transferred from one lifetime to another. So that is something that we want to be careful about. So the effects, so when we're doing harm to somebody, so we first affect their ego, and then we also make them unable to react. So there are loads and loads of classifications of violence, and in the scriptures and in the books, but we're not going to go into the detail of this. And then comes the point that within the yoga world everyone talks about is vegetarianism, as to whether people should be vegetarian or not. So what it says is that well, if you want to lead a certain kind of life, then vegetarianism is the way to go if you want certain benefits and certain state of mind. But it doesn't mean that, you know, there is, it shouldn't, it makes a lot of difference. So what my teacher says is that actually the food, if you're eating it with a different intention, and the food itself is not really that much of a problem, it is the key is the mind. So is the intention with which you're eating it. And so the guideline, if you like, within this framework is that eating non-vegetarian just because it's for fun, then that's probably not recommended. But if it's for survival, then that's okay. So you know, that's for us human beings. And you know, there are loads of monasteries in the Himalayas that's very high in altitude, where nothing grows, and they can't get vegetables. So monks actually have to eat animals, cooked or non-cooked, and that is the only way to survive. So in this case, it is acceptable, because people, with the intention with which people eat it. And even vegetarian food, I mean, it is the intention with which we eat it that is also very important to kind of say. So there are there's a prayer, there are various prayers that people do before eating, and one of them is from the Bhagavad Gita, which kind of with that intention, saying it's the food. You know, it's the food that connects us to this supreme being. So everything that we do is connected to this one purpose, if you like. So what Patanjali says is here is, as a yogi becomes firmly grounded in harmlessness, other people who come near naturally lose any feelings of hostility. So, and you know, so it is quite an important benefit. And as the whole world embraces this value of harmlessness, then the more other people will benefit from it as well, not just these people. But you know, as somebody who has these values, then other people stop being violent towards you, because you kind of emit that kind of vibe, if you like, or it's just the way it naturally happens. So now moving on to the second yama, which is satya, or truthfulness. So truthfulness is very straightforward. So it just means that relate an experience as it is. So no embellishment, no sensationalization, and is really just be 100% truthful. So the truth is a very the thought process is very clear, and it's very undisturbed. So remember that here we are interested about making the mind steady, about making the mind calm, and about making sure that the mind is not occupied with unnecessary things that distract us. So, and obviously lies are very disturbing just to the normal piece of to the day-to-day piece, right? So I've got this story that I'll share with you. So when I was actually living in Fiji, I was living on my own, and in this house, and then I was kind of told, oh, you know, you should be careful when you're living on your own, and people will know, and you know, they might come and rob, or they might, you know, so you just got to be really careful. So I got a little bit scared. So then I started building all these lies about you know, first of all, I was kind of saying, you know, I'm married to a Fijian man who's away, as you know, who's in the army and away. And then to somebody else, I was saying something different, that you know, my husband is just working and he's going to come tomorrow, or something like that. And you know, it was just all like, and after a while, I just was completely confused about what I've told whom. So this is just a funny example to kind of say, you know, so the more you tell lies, you've got to remember who you've told the lies to, and it kind of plays very much on your mind. So really, lies are things that do not sit very well with us, and it is not our nature, which is why it kind of sits very badly with us. so it is something that we need to be careful about. And then when we are adhering to satya or truthfulness, then there's a clarity of thought in thoughts that appears. And what also Patanjali says is that desires are fulfilled if this one yama is followed 100%. So that's what he says. So if you're 100% honest and truthful to yourself, to others, then desires are fulfilled. And he says, as truthfulness is achieved, the fruit of action naturally is it result to the will of the yogi. So we can get rid of any desires by just following this one yama. Now we move on to the third one, which is asteya, so non-stealing. And there are very many categorization of stealing, so I'm not going to go into the detail of it. And also, again, here we need to just be aware that there are people who are stealing unknowingly and people who are stealing knowingly. And unknowingly is taking something and you don't really realize that it's called stealing. But the problem with that is that it is a tendency, it is a vasana, it is an impression deep inside people, and they don't really know that this is something that is happening. And of course, they try to conceal it, and they think that as long as nobody notices, it's fine, but it isn't fine. And the problem with stealing is that the tendency of greed will be increased. And also this will affect the mind again. So remember, it's all about the mind. It's all about preparing us to be for the self-knowledge. So what it says here is when non-stealing is established, all jewels or treasures present themselves or available to the yogi. So this is not material jewels or treasures. So these are the values and the that a yogi seeks. It's not literal jewels or treasures in that sense. Then the fourth one is brahmacharya. So if we talk about celibacy, so there will be different rules for different people. And you might remember one time we talked about the stages of life. So we said there was the first one was when you were a student, brahmacharya. The second one was when you were a householder, grihastha. The third one is when you're retired, so vanaprastha, and then the final one is sannyasi, those who are renunciates or people who have kind of resigned from worldly life. So there is all these or there are rules connected to all these different stages of lives, and it doesn't mean that it's one rule for all, but then people have got to adhere to these rules. So it is a basic desire for people, for human beings, and it's connected to progeny, which is very natural and normal. And just to kind of be aware that there is awareness of these kind of things bring control in line with the rules. Sorry, there's a mistake there. Okay, so it gives strength, so the ability to restrain, if you have to restrain, gives a real strength, and also it kind of frees the mind from these thoughts, and then also over time these desires will go, and this would be required on a path to liberalization, to moksha or self-realization eventually. So here what it says is when walking in the awareness of the highest reality, this is brahmacharya, is firmly established, then a strength, capacity or vitality is acquired. So that's what this means. So here again, just understand that it's not saying it's not allowed, it's not shouldn't be, it's not anything like that. It is just it's just in line with where you are, what stages of life you are, and what it is that you want to achieve in these different stages of life. And then the final yama is aparigraha. So the difference here is, well, we're talking about non-possessiveness, and is the difference between aparigraha and non-stealing is that so stealing is from others, including Mother Nature or other people, and here possessiveness is really in the mind, and we collect and keep things. And what happens when that happens is that if we are a collector, you will know that the desire doesn't end. We want more and more and more of it, because that's what a collector does, which is fine. But if you want to kind of lead a spiritual life, then that's not in line with being a collector in this sense. And why? Is because if you've got a collection, if you've got things that you want to keep, your mind goes there to protect it. So, extra thoughts then will come and disturb the mind. So remember, this is all about the mind. This is all about the peace of the mind. And so therefore, having too many things is a worry, right? So you've got a yacht, and then the cyclone comes, and then you're worried about what will happen. You're worried about whether people will smash it, or whether the weather will something will happen to it. Or if you've got this really fancy car, and then you're always worried about where do you park it when you need to go somewhere, or whether somebody will run to the back of you, or so it's all these things that it's fine. I mean, if you want to lead a worldly life, these things are absolutely fine. It's just saying that this causes a lot of thoughts in the mind that might not be in line with what you want to achieve. So it's not saying don't do it, it's just saying this is what it is. And then the idea of having, well, aparigraha also means being minimalist. Okay, so we can take whatever we want from nature, we can, to survive. And there is this saying that goes along these lines. I can't remember the exact words, but it goes something like, the world has enough resources for the needs of everyone, but not for the greed of a few, something like that. So again, we need to just be careful about this idea of greed and the environment and what we're making and what as a society we're doing to Mother Nature. And this all arises because of these possessiveness, of this desire to accumulate. And so it is just something that we need to understand. And then there is non-attachment that comes with aparigraha. So non-attachment with the mind and the body as well, when we're not worried about these things. And also once this quality comes, then it helps us to develop this thing of non-attachment or detachment from things, including our mind and our body. So remember, we don't want to be in the mind. We're not the mind. We're not the body. So we want to be detached from these as well. We want the body identification to be less. And these are things that can help us. So what Patanjali says is, so what's the benefit of aparigraha in his words is, when one is steadfast in no non-possessiveness or non-grasping with the senses, there arises knowledge of the why and wherefore of past and future incarnations. So here, I mean, we're not going to go into the details of what it means here, but it just means that you get some special powers if you kind of follow this. And for those who know the term is siddhis, is what he's referring to here. So don't worry about this last bit. I can talk about it a bit more if you have questions later. And then we go on to the niyamas. So the niyamas are more the observances that we need to kind of self-observances that we need to adhere to or watch. So there are 5 of them again, so 5 yamas and 5 niyamas. And here the first one is socha, which is sometimes translated as cleanliness, and also also here purity of mind and the body. So it's a little bit more than just than being physically clean. And the second one is santosha, which means contentment. The third one is tapas or tapaha, means training the senses, having a disciplined life. And fourth is swadhyay, which means study of the scriptures, study of the self, reflection on sacred words. So here, when we say sacred words and scriptures, so it's not related to one religion or one, it's just anything. And then finally, this is the one that's very often misunderstood. So this is Ishvara Pranidhan, which means practicing the presence of the creative source. So acknowledging the presence of the creative source, and almost giving in to that presence, and realizing that presence for what it is. So the first niyama is socha, so cleanliness of the body and the mind. And it is more than just being not sweaty, or so we kind of clean ourselves. We take a lot of care about the type of soap we use, and the lotions, and all that kind of thing. And there's no problem with that, and that needs to be done, and that's absolutely fine. And but it is kind of saying that for a spiritual aspirant, for somebody who is interested in spirituality, then there is more to cleanliness. So it is actually an intention. So when we talk about holy baths, about something that kind of purifies the mind and the body at the same time. So in this culture, we, before showering or whilst showering, there is a prayer. There's a prayer for everything, brushing the teeth. So everything that is done with an intention, with a different intention. So which is the intention towards purifying the mind and connecting to the source, has a very different outcome from just doing it for the physical being need of it. So as I say, there's no problem. We understand the physical bit, but it's just saying again that if you acknowledge that there is more to it, then the benefits that you get from these simple acts are a lot more. So the intention actually changes everything. It changes the organs, changes the body and the mind. And so one thing so people do all sorts of meditation about, cleanliness, and kind of say, well, yeah, we need this body, we need to keep it clean, and it is helping us towards our goal, but we also need to understand that this body is different from us. So some yogis actually meditate on the impurities of the body, and how we are not this body, and how we are not the dead skin on the body, how we are not the excretion of the body. So that's got nothing to do. So there are various things that people can do or do with relation to that. But then remember that the whole purpose of everything is around understanding that we are not this body, which is the practice here. And so there is the psychological efforts that we do towards cleanliness. So we clean our mind of things as well. So sometimes we use the term, we declutter or unclutter. I'm not sure what's the right word. So really it is an intention. So try it when you are actually having a shower. So you can say a little mantra, or you can just say, I am doing this to be clean, but also for my growth, for my spiritual evolution. This is why I'm doing it. So just try it and see how it works. And also, I mean, by saying that, it is very well, it is suggested that people do that first thing in the morning. So first thing, clean the mouth, and then the orifices, and then have a shower. So, and that kind of changes everything if a shower is taken first thing in the morning, among the first things in the morning. So by cleanliness, what happens is the mind becomes steady, and we understand that the mind understand that unnecessary things are to be avoided, not see things, touch and listen to what's not necessary for one's own progress. So it is cleaning in the general sense. So it's cleaning the senses and everything else. Okay, so now moving on to the benefits of Saucha. So Patanjali says is through cleanliness and purity of body, one develops an attitude of distancing or detachment, or disinterest towards one's own body, and becomes disinclined towards becoming into contact with bodies of others. So that's, we talked about brahmacharya before. So remember, it's not saying that we don't love ourselves, we don't love our body, we don't take care of it, right? So don't misunderstand this at all. We have to take care of our body, but we have this detachment with our body. And also through cleanliness and purity of the body and mind comes the purity of the mental essence. So sattva, so we would have used this term when we were talking about the qualities and the gunas, and a pleasantness, goodness, and gladness of feeling. One pointed with intent. So one pointed means towards that spiritual goal that we have. The conquest and mastery of the sense, and a fitness, qualification, or capability for self-realization. So again, here, everything is having that one goal in mind. And for here, remember, self-realization is happiness in our daily life as well. So it is applicable to everyone at every stage of life. And so the next one, sorry, that should read 2. So niyama number 2 is santosha, and santosha means contentment. And this is very important in the material society that we live in, where the creation of wealth dictates everything. And what are the problems with creation of wealth is that it generates more and more waste. We need to recycle more, and we all know that we're not very good at this. And so, yeah, it creates a lot of waste. And then as a result of this, there's more and more materials are needed, and there is exploitation of Mother Earth like there is no tomorrow, and there are no future generations to think about. So why? Because people want more and more. So they've got something and they want something better, and they want something else once they've got that one. And then once, so it's a never ending cycle. And that's because people cannot be content with what they've got. And so we've got to be more in line or attuned with these trade-offs about more earnings versus consumerism and versus life sustainability. So I mentioned that at the very beginning, where I was kind of saying that, we have very short-termist views about what we want and ignore a lot of these things. So it is something that we have to think about. And so what Patanjali says, the benefit of practicing santosha, or be content with what we have, is from an attitude of contentment, unexcelled happiness, mental comfort, joy, and satisfaction is obtained. So this is a feeling that we cultivate. So this thing of being content with what we have. And in a lot of cultures, we do that. We say grace. We kind of be grateful for what we have. We know that it is being given to us, and we respect it. So it's very much something like that. And there are all sorts of practices that people do about gratitude, and we'll talk about those in the interactive session, about the various things that we can do to practice all these that we're talking about today. And then there is number 3. Sorry, I've just messed this all up. So number 3 is tapas or tapaha, which means, so tapas is not these delicacies in the Spanish restaurants, but tapas here means a disciplined life, means different practices that we do. So as I mentioned, so it consists of daily routine, daily practice. So the key is to have actions, schedule a time for everything, and also in terms of food, to have the right attitude and to the amount of food that we're eating and the right attitude with which we're eating. To consider fasting sometimes, maybe if your body allows, is again to control the mind. And then there is control of speech. So is just to kind of watch how much we speak, all these senses that we kind of control. And then also just be aware of what we are feeding our eyes. So I don't know if this is true, but 30% of brain energy is taken up by eyesight. So imagine that, if you close your eyes, how much of kind of peace of mind you can get, how much of stimulus that you are preventing yourself from. So sometimes in the asana class, I say, close your eyes if you can, if it feels good, and just be with it. So this is the practice. And sometimes you can just try and do a whole yoga class, a whole asana class with your eyes closed and see what the experience is like. And again, hearing is listening to only what is necessary for one's progress. So fake news, unnecessary news, I mean, it's good to know what's going on, but then if there's nothing much we can do about it, then if it's not helping us or others, then do we really need to hear this? Do we really need to know this? And about touch, the sense of touch as well. And so the idea about tapas is to make sure that whatever we're doing, whatever spiritual practice that we want to do, it is something that we like to do, and it is something that we can stick with it and not be too ambitious. And also realize that there would be some time when things don't go so well as we hope to, but to have that compassion towards ourselves, to say, all right, okay, I've not managed to do a few things for a few days, but then it's not the end of the world, so now I'll carry on again. So it's just to kind of be reasonable about these things, and to kind of be compassionate with yourself and gentle with yourself and very understanding with yourself as well. But also to note when it's actually tamas setting in, so when it's actually being laziness, or when it's being complacency, or when it's being our let's say, not demonic, but the other not so great things that are coming to our mind that's preventing us. So through tapas, there comes a destruction of mental impurities and an ensuing mastery or perfection over the body and the mental sense organs and organs of action. So we are able to control all these in our body and mind, and it makes a massive change. And then number 4 is swadhyay. So swadhyay means to learn about the self, to learn about the scriptures, and that helps to cultivate the yearning for freedom. So the more you get into this, the more you kind of realize what's going on, and the more it might kind of change a lot in ways we perceive this whole spirituality thing. And also there are physiological effects from studying about the self. So the brain waves are regulated. These are things that people have shown. And memory power is improved. Continuity of thoughts, for one, that is improved as well. So what we mean by swadhyay is studying the sacred words, studying text, or sorry, listening. And so the benefit of this is, from the study of the self and reflection on sacred words, one attains contact, communion with the underlying force of reality or reality. So it is connection with that source, with that primordial force. And then finally, the fifth is Ishvara Pranidhan. So Ishvara, you know this word. So Ishvara means God and or the creator, and Pranidhan. And by doing this, so this means is kind of letting go of our ego and recognizing the presence of Ishvara, and whatever happens is through the grace of Ishvara. So the ego is reduced, the mind is not disturbed, and it also makes the practice of other yamas easier to do. And the mental and physical are both together. So the surrender here is complete. So it is really accepting that there is this creator, and whatever we do is because of this creator. So this is really an attitude of letting go into one's own source. The state of perfected concentration is attained when we've actually in that communion, if you like. So just to summarize, so the yamas are the codes of restraints, and the niyamas are the observances that we have to observe for ourselves. And the idea is everything we do is to purify the mind. A peaceful mind leads to happiness and spiritual growth. If we want to achieve spiritual progress, so there are practices that we need to observe. And we will talk more about this in our interactive session, but you can start thinking about them. And also to just realize that, you know, I've talked only about what is in the Yoga Sutras here, and just to say that the aim is to gain happiness and freedom, as the two types of freedom which we talked about. So we need to think of the form these values can take in our lives, and then practice according to our temperament. So this is something that we can discuss, and this is something that we might want to go away and think about, and what it is that we might want to work on for our own happiness. And remember that most of the things that we do is for our own happiness. If we want to forgive someone, it's not because of that person, but it's about ourselves, because we don't want these mind waves. And once we start understanding these things, then things become a lot easier. And just to sort of really understand that whatever we do is for our own happiness, and that's all there is to it, really. So I will end here with the main lecture. So will just say that the next class now is on the June the 6th, where we'll be talking about the mind, the intellect, the vasanas, etc. So make a note in your diary. So it's the first Sunday of every month. And then the next interactive practical class is on May the 16th, where we will be talking a little bit more about the practical bit of what we discussed today. So we will end here. So just closing your eyes for a moment. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamadachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you very much.